I can. You're a little low.
Okay, I can make it a little better.
We're getting some echo back of my voice, and I don't know where that's coming from.
That's the problem I was having. That's why I messed with my volume.
Okay.
You both actually sound fine from our end.
Okay, great.
Thanks.
I don't care if Sean hears me or not.
You don't care.
He hears enough
right.
from me.
I can. You're a little low. See, now I can. Now there's the echo of myself talking. So we're live over there on YouTube. That's right, folks. We are live. We'll be there. We're going to start here in a moment, but here you are. We're just kind of yapping at each other while we wait for things
Some
to
are
happen.
more live than others.
And where are you on that scale, Severson?
With my volume low.
Low. That's right. All right. I think Kelsey's in the chat room. Kelsey, are you in the chat room? The YouTube is about 40 seconds behind where we actually talk. So it's an interesting thing because I have to watch y'all, I have to watch my camera, and I have to watch the other screen. So you'll see my head spinning a lot. That's why. So.
What's new?
You know, yeah. Jeez. Oh, Mark, 2 years ago, we were doing this live.
I know.
With noisy people behind us.
I can get some if you want.
Some noisy people?
Yeah.
Yeah. Amanda, can you bring in some noisy children so we feel like we're actually at the conference?
I totally, but I'm not sure if we really want all that noise.
You know, babies crying would really make, you know, some of us feel at home as far as being on stage. Good. All right. If you are watching us on YouTube, we're just yakking at each other for a moment while, you know, the 3 o'clock hour comes up. We, of course, want your questions and your thoughts and whatever that's polite in the chat box. Kelsey will be managing the chat box. Kelsey is one of our staff members, along with Kelsey and Kieran and Michelle and myself and others. And kind of keep things moving for Small Tooth Dog. Even a small publisher needs staff, and that's what Kelsey does. If you've ever been sent anything from here, Kelsey probably handled it. So that was her role. And I'll wait to see if she can hear us. Kelsey, tell me you're live. Tell me you can hear us. From the beyond. Kelsey, from the beyond. Anyway. This is the quietest this panel it will ever be.
We can fix that too.
They're all very serious right now. All right, Harriet's here. I'm here. Amanda, Mark, Tamara, Michelle. Good. Yay. Have any of you been able to catch any of the other live stuff? Not only ours, but any of the Tucson stuff. There's so much they're doing.
Yeah, I popped in a little bit this morning on yours with the illustrators.
Yeah, with Casey. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, after I finished my story on Keen, I came over. So it was good.
Cool. That's good. All right. Phyllis says we're up. Says we're alive and happening. Good. Hey, folks, it's Sean Bavala from the Small Tooth Dog Publishing Group. And we're doing the Kidlit panel. Children's books, authors, illustrators. We're just going to talk about Kidlit. We're just going to have a good time with this. It's very interesting. I'm going to give you a little background about what we do with Kidlit and where it came from with the work that we're doing. Feel free to tweet and all that other stuff. So our hashtag for the company is Small Tooth Dog, hashtag Small Tooth Dog. We're talking about Kidlit, which is kind of that shorthand, hip shorthand. We've got a bunch of authors. I'm going to have them introduce themselves to you in just a few moments. We want you to know that we have lots of stuff going on. So I want to kind of just tell you what's happening before we dive in with all of our illustrators, all of our authors, talking about their stuff. We'll show you some of their books and just We're just gonna have a good time. Your comments are welcome in the box. Put them in there. Kelsey will be able to help us maintain that. What are we doing this weekend? Well, we've been live streaming. The Tucson Festival of Books has graciously said, exhibitors, you want to live stream? Knock yourselves out. So we're doing that. We've had several today. We had one with Casey Fritz earlier. We had one with Harriet Cole. We just had a really interesting one with Laura Packer, Harriet, and myself talking about the oral storytelling tradition and what that, how that influences your writing. That when you are a better storyteller, you become a better writer, and why that happens. So that's in there. We're on the Kidlit panel right now at 3, and then tonight I'm doing a workshop called So You Want to Publish a Book. Publishing has changed a lot in the world, and some of the information you may have in your brain if you're thinking about writing is really old. I put this first book out, Daddy Teller, the official, it's 2009 is the official copyright, and how much publishing has even changed in those 12 years since I first put this, the very first book I put out. So it's been something else. So if you want to be part of that and that kind of conversation today about what the options are for publishing right now, what you need to know so that you don't get bullied either way about publishing, come to that at 7 o'clock tonight. And then tomorrow we continue our discussions at 10 a.m. I've also opened this up to all of our authors and illustrators about what have you learned about publishing. There's this great idea that you're going to publish a book and it'd be bonbons and royalty checks. Oh, it won't be. So we'll do that. At noon, I'm doing a workshop, more of a kind of a reflection and conversation about the things that you should do if you are writing a children's book or a nonfiction book, what you really should be doing as an author before you even publish the book. Many people think that publishing the book is the first step, and it's actually not, and we'll talk about that. And then Sunday afternoon tomorrow at 3 o'clock, all of these are Arizona times, because, you know, the Tucson Festival of Books, right? 3 o'clock tomorrow, we're going to talk about what's some of the stuff that's coming. What are we working on in the future? What types of interesting projects are happening there? And in a couple of places, I can show you some sneak peeks at some of the initial rough cuts of art, which is always fascinating to look at, and how we look at those as an organization. So we'll have a good time with all of that. So I am glad that all of you are here for any of that. Put your questions in the box, etc. So I'm going to give all of our staff, our lovely people here, also volunteering their time today, to introduce themselves and just tell you a little bit about who they are. And I'm just going to go in the order that I have them on the screen. And so Amanda, you are going to be first. So talk to us.
Is Amanda Malek Amati. I'm an Arizona native. I did have a little 3-year stint in Florida and a semester stint in Ireland, but otherwise Arizona is my home. I'm a dancer and a dance teacher, and along with the author of 10 ballet dancers. I'm a mom of 4, and I just love writing and reading and dancing. Those are my main hobbies, besides binge watching some shows.
Oh, that's terrific. Thanks. Welcome. Glad you are here. We'll talk about your book in a moment. Tamara, you're next.
Oh, hi, I'm Tamara Norwood. I'm a youth librarian with Maricopa County Libraries, and I write for very young children all the way through middle grade. I'm a transplant to Arizona. I'm originally from California, but my family and I have lived here for 25 years, so we consider ourselves to be natives at this point as well. And I'm just super happy to be here. Thanks for including me today, Sean.
Absolutely. Glad you're with us. And you're just kind of starting on your adventure of putting a book out with us. So we're excited to have you. I just officially hired your artist yesterday. So we're moving. We're moving. So you and I have a couple things we got to talk about, but we're going. It's going to be great.
Oh, thank you.
Mr. Mark, I know you're embarrassed to speak in public, so I'll skip you. No, I know you can't speak in public, Mark. Mark Severson, talk to us.
I could take the screen off, you don't hide, but I'm Mark Severson. For those of you who don't know me, for those of you who do know me, I'm still Mark Severson. I intended to become a writer when I left high school in 1968, and 40 years later, I finally achieved it after being an archaeologist and retiring as a career educator, elementary school. And I've been telling stories professionally since 1986. So I've got a little background in the oral tradition. And I've appeared at Tucson Festival Books now. I think this is my 6th time, mostly
Wow.
as performing for stories.
Cool. Very good. Mark's book is Don't Throw Me in the Cholla Patch. That's that one. Thanks, Mark. Michelle, my friend, you're up.
Hi, I am Michelle Bavala, and I don't write, but I do make the pictures. Art has always been in my background, although when I was in high school, I listened to all the big people who said, you can't make money doing art. So I became an elementary teacher instead. And then I had kids. And when my kids grew up and didn't quite need me so much, then I finally got into my art. So I am not an Arizona native, but I might as well be. I've been here since I was 13, so I consider myself a desert rat. But yeah.
Very good. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Harriet, you're up.
I'm up. Well, I'm not in Arizona. I, unlike most of everybody else around here this afternoon, I'm originally from New Mexico, and I did spend 30 years in Arizona. But just recently, I have returned to New Mexico and am now happily ensconced in the mountains east of Albuquerque, having a wonderful, if sometimes overly exciting time. And of course, part of the excitement is the 15 pounds of muscle and bounce has made its appearance in the world, which has been just, one of the more exciting things that's happened in a long time. I'm a storyteller. I worked both at South Mountain Community College. I taught storytelling in a number of other courses for a number of years after having earned a certificate from them. And before I was a storyteller, I tried to be a writer, and I was a newspaper reporter and an editor, and I fixed traffic signals and all those things you do when you don't really have much of an education, but you're smart and pick things up and you need money. So it's a journey of professions that apparently amazes Sean upon occasion. I think it's the traffic signals that get to him. But now that I have got this book out, I'm just really having fun being a children's literature author.
Yeah, it does. It does. And now so along with your traffic signal repairing piece, now having a master's degree in something obscure like Norse literature. I don't know exactly what you describe your degree as, but it's like, okay, so now you're ready to put out a book of Norse tales, right? So it's pretty good. All right, I'm going to go ahead and turn off what's on the screen. We'll come back to that screen a little bit. So we'll come back to live human beings now. Good. All right. So let's talk a little bit about Kidlit and kind of the journey that Small Tooth Dog has done with that. When we originally started, we were really not going to dive into children's literature. We were going to do a lot of work with creativity and the arts and things like that. However, the first book that we created ever was this one, which is Daddy Teller. You can put daddyteller.com in the link there. Daddy Teller, which is how to be a hero to your kids and teach them what's really important by telling them one simple story at a time. And so it really was our first kind of delve into how parents can better interact with their children by using storytelling. So we stayed we stayed where we were with trying to give people work on creativity and the arts and what have you. But then pieces of this book, which includes a bunch of stories in it of traditional folktales, pieces of this book really took off, and people were like, so where did those come from? And what are those stories about? And I wish I had that story to read to my kid, not only to tell it to them, but read it to them. So Michelle and I started to play around with traditional stories, plus the work that she does as an illustrator and her work in collage work in particular. Our first book was Apples for the Princess, which is a adaptation of a Grimm fairy tale, and that is in the Daddy Teller book. For some reason, it's not in my office at the moment, so I can't show you that, but I can show you the second one, which also contains some of that. And that work was, that book was Fox, always get my titles wrong, The Fox and the Crow, Art and Stories Inspired by Aesop. And so Michelle's hand put all this picture exists in the real world and other pictures like that. And we started to explore what it meant to create books for kids, but also for really always with the idea of how will families use this? How will families benefit from the work that we're doing? Over the course of that, we started to, as things happen, when you say I'm a publisher, everyone says I have a book. So as people say I have a book, you start to find books out there that's like, oh, okay, that fits our feel, our emotion, there's a word I'm looking for here that just escaped me. The charism of our organization is to make books that serve. And so we have books that are coming from the folktale, fairy tale world, but we also have books that are about helping families and helping people deal with their world. So when I look as a publisher, I don't say I'm going to choose or not choose every book. I look at it, and my first filter is to say, does this fit our feel, our charism? And one of the first books we did that with was Don't Throw Me in the Cholla Patch. Look, it's got a gold thing on it, so it means it won an award. Don't Throw Me in the Cholla Patch with Mark Severson, which is an adaptation of that traditional kind of trickster tale, the Brer Rabbit style, but there's many tales like that in the world. Tricksters are a very common thing in folk tales and fairy tales. So we kind of started exploring stuff with Mark Severson, and we've moved really well from there. We recently released with Amanda Malik Amati, 10 Ballet Dancers, which is just a beautiful, beautiful book. Beautiful art from a New Mexico artist, Catherine Gutkowski, and just really put together some really nice looking stuff with a great story. And Amanda, I'm going to come to you in a bit and ask you to talk about perseverance as an author, because you know why I'm going to ask you that question about perseverance. You know why I'm going to do that. And we've continued to play with other books and produce other stuff. We have a number of things in the works right now. Harriet Cole's book, 15 Pounds of Muscle and Bounce, is designed for older kids. Really has some unique art. We've done several lives on this book today. And then I just released The Moon Was Not Happy, which is a bilingual book from a story that I had been telling in the oral tradition for more than a dozen years before it ever got anywhere near a book like this. So we've got quite a variety of stuff in there. And that's kind of been our journey, is to explore the kidlit. So the kidlit side of our organization is really blossomed in a way that I don't think we originally intended. But it's been remarkably rewarding to work on this. So I'll stop talking for a moment. I want to throw open to the floor here. Why are you connected to Kidlit? At whatever reason you're in the call today, why? What is it about children's literature? And by Kidlit, we mean basically, anything from the womb to probably before they hit the YA stuff, kind of like 15 maybe. Why? What is it about Kidlit children's books that appeals to you? So I'm just going to open the floor for a moment. Anybody want to jump in?
I'll jump in first, because it started with me because I do most of my storytelling for children. I don't do it exclusively for children, but the greatest amount of it is focused on children or children and families. And so it was just a natural slide over to take stories that I tell and try to turn them into books. And so that's how I got started in it.
Now, Mark, you've published other stuff though outside of Kidlit, outside of kids' books, right?
Yeah, I have 5 novels out also, 4 in a series of horror fantasy, and then a novel of prehistoric Arizona.
Yes, good. And those are more fiction work. Yes, that's all fiction.
Fiction, definitely fiction, and definitely not for children.
Right. Done that. Good. Anybody else? Why? What is it about children's literature that pulls you towards producing a book?
I can.
Yeah, Cameron, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, for me, aside from being a librarian, a youth librarian, the time in your life when books bring you joy is when you're very, very young. When you start out with a picture book, to be cuddled with someone, and to read those books over and over, the memories that are created from those. There is no other time in life when reading is an actual joy to you. It brings more than just the aesthetic of being read to. There is a feeling that's attached to those books. So when I'm in the library, obviously I have contact with every kind of book there is, but I'm
Right.
always drawn to those children's books. And I also want to be able to create those memories.
That creating memory stuff, that's really powerful. I think the first time I met a father with his kid who said, "This is the man who wrote that story I tell you."
Oh,
To which the kid, as he should have, properly turned to his dad, and he's like 3, so he's like in the arm's range, turned to his dad and says, "I only like your stories, Daddy." And you know, it's good stuff. I mean, it's terrific, and it's like, yeah. So that we're creating memories, we're creating pathways in the brain, for that. That's really, really very powerful. Anybody else? Why are you drawn to Kidlit?
I'll
Yeah,
go
Harry,
next.
go. Yeah.
Okay, well, there's a combination of reasons. One is the being a storyteller part. And although I don't tell much to very small children, I've done a lot of telling to the upper elementary school range. Plus, as an instructor at the South Mountain Community College Storytelling Institute, I was teaching a lot of emerging storytellers. And due to complexities of the community college system and the institute and this, that, and the other thing, I inherited the job of teaching children's literature. Now, I knew nothing about children's literature in a formal manner. I mean, I'd read children's literature ever since I was a child and after that, but I had to sit down, and when you are an adjunct, you usually have 3 weeks warning before you have to teach a class about which you know nothing. Ask me about the semester I taught Romans compared with Mayans. That was fun too. But anyway, I sat down and I went through all kinds. See, the archaeologist here's laughing. I sat down and I read everything I could get my hands on, and tried to pick it all out and all that sort of stuff. And I became aware that this was really important stuff. And so that sort of tucked in my bag, along with the storytelling, and along with the fact that a certain storyteller, mentor, coach dude who is on this call kept saying to me after he liked a story I told, you should write a book of children's stories. Okay, then. Well, it finally happened, and I'm very glad it did.
Yeah.
I wanted to add to you, Harriet. You should have told them it's Maya and Greek. It's Aztec and Roman.
Okay, well, I picked out some random, we're going too far off, but the best description was talk about 3 civilizations and pre 15 something or another. And I got to pick them, and I went, okay, I know Romans from other things I've done, and I know something about the Central America because of living, at the northern edge of it, and Chaco and all that. What can I do with this? And it was just, I was always about 2.5 hours ahead of the class itself.
Yeah.
Oh.
I've taught stuff like that, indeed. Amanda, you have an interesting story about why you're writing kids books. Your what I call your origin story on this. Can you talk about that at all? Because it's pretty interesting.
But also, one thing I was going to add, a part of my
Yeah.
origin story, the reason I'm here today is because of all my memories of a child being surrounded by literature. So the house I grew up in had a hallway, and then the rooms were just off the hallway. But down that hallway was 2 bookshelves that were up to the ceiling, just filled with books. And it was my favorite thing to go grab those books off the shelves and just read. And all the memories of my mom and my dad reading to me to bed at night, and my weekends spent reading and everything like that. I was just always surrounded by books. My home currently is surrounded by books. There's books in every child's room. There's books in our hallway. There's books under the stairs, all of those things. But the other childhood experience that has brought me here today is that first author visit that I had when I was a kid. And it was Mr. Tom, and the book was Messy Cat, and I'm not displaying it. It's back here. And just when you are a kid and you're just looking at that author and you're going, wow, that's something I could be someday. and just was inspired and always remembered that that was something I wanted to do, and always enjoyed writing throughout elementary school, wrote diaries in high school, and, you know, picked up and put down my writing journey when I finally picked it up again in 2017.
The idea of being surrounded by books, how important that is for families to understand that. Michelle, who, you know, has a background in elementary education, right? We have that hallway of books, that library that you built down the hall from this room that I'm in right now. And where did all those, did we buy all those books? Did that just come from, what was our source on so many of those books? Because we have so many books in the house.
Oh man, a lot of those books came from your high school and my high school, classics, things we had to read. I
Yeah.
think you and I, we kept them all. And then as our kids grew and we got books for them and their favorite books, and collections grew, and favorite authors and favorite illustrators, until we had at least 2,000 books in that library. There's not that many there now, but yeah.
Well, yeah, only because they've gotten older and we've trimmed a little bit on that.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
you're supposed to do that?
We had a stack of early readers like about 3 miles high, and you know, we don't need early readers anymore, so they're gone.
And if you're ever going to move, you do need to have the books slightly under control. Although
Mhm.
I got to say that moving books is a really good way to regain your muscular, youthful figure, however, with a lot of pain involved.
Mark, what do you have?
I want to talk about hanging on to favorite books. I bought this in 1958 for $2. It's All About Dinosaurs by Roy Chapman Andrews, and I still have it. So we don't get rid of books in my house. If we buy them, they're here. You know, they're here somewhere. Just keep looking, you'll find them.
Yep. You have lots of grandchildren to pass books on to as well.
That's true.
Yeah. Do you think having, like Amanda talks about, you know, the Mr. Tom experience, that book, and the Messy Cat book, and do you think part of your life choices came from the power of a book like that, Mark?
Absolutely. I bought it because I intended to be an archaeologist digging up dinosaurs. And it wasn't for quite a while that I found out that paleontologists dig up dinosaurs. And by then I was already in school as an archaeologist, so I just kept up with it, you know.
Since you were there, you know, since you're already in that process. Yeah. What's funny about our house with the library that we have is our four children are all grown. They're all young adults, but when they were little, they would say to either Michelle or I'm looking for this book. And we would go to the library and we'd have 2 or 3 copies of that book in there. Sometimes, you know, no matter what they wanted to read, they're like, do you have Treasure Island? Do we have Treasure Island? You know, I've got
Their
Canterbury
cousins-
Tales.
Their
Hardback or
cousins would come
paperback?
over.
Say it
Their
again, Michelle.
cousins would come over. The cousins would come over saying, I got to read this book for school. Do you have it? And it's like, well, go check in the library. And yeah, it was there.
Yeah. We
I
have quite
even
the-
alphabetized the authors. Hey.
Oh my gosh.
On the
Yeah.
question of being exposed to writers when you were little, like, you know, the visiting author that came to your class, Amanda, mine is slightly different, but I think, again, it was one of those points of people can do these things, really? Because we had a family friend who was, when I was a very small child, who had been on an early expedition in an effort to climb K2, the second highest mountain in the world. And it didn't go all that well. As a matter of fact, it went fatally badly for a couple of the members of the expedition. And Mr. Bell, the man who I knew as Mr. Bell from who mowed his lawn across the street, and Mr. Bell I saw at the swimming pool, had lost a number of toes from these errors on this expedition. And I'd always been aware, okay, Mr. Bell lost some toes on a mountain, which is kind of didn't make sense when I was little. But then my parents had bought the book that he and the other mountaineers had written about this expedition. And I started to read. It was not a children's book, but I was reading it. And there was a section where he described exactly how the accident occurred that resulted with the loss of some lives and his toes. And then the effort of coming out of the deepest Himalayas without being able to walk. And after that, every time I saw Mr. Bell and his toes, or thought about his toes because I saw the rest of Mr. Bell, it was like, that's in a book. Things that happen can be in books. People can do things and say things and write things down, and they can be books. And it was just kind of this low level reminder that, it wasn't a children's thing, but it was a books reflect the world thing.
Yeah, right. They can be pretend and true.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think that one of our, as a publisher, we're looking for either stuff that comes out of the oral tradition, folk tales, fairy tales, etc., but also stuff that can be true, and stuff that not only is a book something to read, but something that can help you move forward. And I think the yoga-based book that we're doing with Tamara and Jerry is really an example of that. That books aren't just pretend; they have application. Yeah, really interesting. Amanda, you talk about the power of that first story, that first experience with the Mr. Tom book, but you, in the last couple of days, now as a published author, have had an experience of being the author that comes to the school. So talk about that. What was that like to finally have that book in hand and say, here we go?
It was amazing. So I had given away virtual story times on my Twitter, on my Instagram, and on Facebook. So, and you can even see, if you'd like to go to @author_Amanda on Instagram, I put up a video like right after my second one. I was just so filled with joy. I just had to share it. I did a live real quick. And so it's on there, posted on the grid. And just the kids, like my heart, it was just so happy. And I'm doing like an interview series on my Instagram too. And one of the authors had mentioned, now those kindergartners, they're not going to ask questions. They'll just tell you things. And so the first thing I got told was, I love you. And I'm like, yeah, thank you. I love you too. It was just the best. And they were giving me hearts, and it was just amazing. And their little faces, and because it was virtual, then a couple of them coming up to the screen. So I'd just keep waving. I go back to your seat. Like this. It was just so wonderful. And there, at the last school I did, the principal was in the room, and the teacher said that he just thought it was a great presentation. And so that was a fun experience to have. I was virtual in Florida, New York, and Arizona yesterday, and it was just fantastic. Dreams coming true with that. So it was beautiful, and I can't wait till when we get to be in person and get to show the kids the book and everything, and they'll get to feel the pages and touch the pages. Luckily, two of the winners had actually won when I was giving away books as I was going toward the launch of it. And so they were able to show their children the book. So that was really neat that they had that experience.
Oh, they had the book in hand then.
Yeah. So the teacher had won it through previous things. So they did get to actually see the physical book. So that was exciting.
Okay.
Talk about the kindergarten experience. And I taught kindergarten for 11 years. And probably the most powerful thing in those years was to see a child learn to read on their own. You see it just goes, it explodes out of them. I can read this, it's just the most amazing thing. I always say you can't teach a child to read, but you can help them learn to read.
Yep. Powerful stuff. And how, sometimes it's cheesy to say, oh, if you want to go on an adventure, just read a book, right? But the truth is though, right, there is some of that, especially in, Tamara was talking about that feeling that comes with the books. There is an adventure that you open up opportunities for them. I mean, when I was in like 5th grade or something, I could not get enough Encyclopedia Brown books. The library couldn't get enough of them for me. They were like everywhere. And it's just like that whole thing, that whole way of thinking and scientific thinking. And man, that's wrapped in my brain, the power of reading that. And that's at 5th grade, man. That's at 5th grade. I want to switch gears for just a moment. Tamara, I want to think about, I'm asking you to kind of put on the librarian hat at the moment. So as a librarian who works with youth, what is it that brings your catches your attention as a book for kids? You do a great job on your website with being able to put books out. So what is it as a librarian that catches your attention about Kidlit?
Well, before I even get the books in my hand, obviously I've got access to the Kirkus reviews and Publishers Weekly and, book pages, all of those things. So I read the reviews and I look for particular books, but what catches my eye when they actually come into the library is for the very young children, first of all, well, for any age group, what I'm mainly looking for is great writing in the fewest amount of words as possible. Because storytelling for children is not just a watered down version of adult literature. It is so specific. It is so much more complex than, because you have fewer words to use, your chapters are smaller, the page lengths are smaller. You have to make sure that there's a cliffhanger or something to make those children turn the page at the end of every chapter, or if it's a picture book, turn every single page to go to the next one too. So I'm always looking for great writing. I typically am going to look for something that has a little bit of humor and surprise. I'm always looking for a surprise element. And if it brings tears to my eyes, I pass it all around to all of the other librarians. We all cry over it. And then I post it on my blog. There's just a lot of amazing books coming out. A lot of the YA lit that comes out, I'm not a huge fan of, because I feel like it is just a lot of books that maybe couldn't make it in the adult market. And so now they add a little bit of fancy cover to it and they publish it that way. The writing tends to be not great, but there is so much great literature in that middle grade and some of those early chapter books right now. And I can't get enough of them, to be honest with you. And I'm so happy when I can recommend books and kids come back in the library and say, I love that book. What else should I read?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting thing to, as a publisher, I see people submit books and we're pretty, I'll get really creative to get a book out. I mean, I'll work with a thing that has a different feel or what have you, but the understanding of things, like for us, pattern interrupt is really important in books. That's one of our hallmarks and stuff. We certainly did that in 10 Ballet Dancers. Without giving away the pattern interrupt, there's a definite, it's a counting down book, right? So everybody thinks this is how it's going to go, but it doesn't. And Amanda, I know that we have, when you did these last couple of lives, when there's a whole thing in there about none, right? Did that translate with the kids?
Yeah, they were fine. The first kindergarten teacher, she had kind of stopped me, and I think I got to the none part, and then she asked them questions about, like, what do you think is the thing at the end, not to give it away. And so they made their guesses and stuff. The other kindergarten class, I had them like throw up a 1 or I'm giving away that part, the none, like a 0. And then I talked to them how, I know the number is 0, but I said none, so it could rhyme with done. That was in the previous part, because the book does rhyme. So it translated just fine. A personal story for my children. So when I read it to our now 11-year-old, and so he heard it when he was like 9.5, almost 10, or he just turned 10. He got it, that it was none with the 2 going away. And then our 7-year-old at the time, and our very literal child, he said, no, it's supposed to be 1. And I explained to him how, you see, the 2 dancers left. And so now that's why it's none. And so went back with that. And then a funny story about, with the way that none happens, that same kindergarten teacher, when she read it aloud on her Instagram, she'd asked permission if she could read it aloud when it sent it to her. And I was like, sure. And she said none. And then she just stopped. And I wasn't on there with her right when she read it live. And I was just like, oh my goodness, that's so funny. Because then she flips the next page. She's like, oh, the book is not done. So it's not done after the nun. There's a little more to the story. You'll find out what has happened to those dancers.
That's perfect. That is okay. My job is done here. We're finished. We've done excellent. That's terrific. I want people to go, oh wait, there's more. and sometimes we hit that really well in a book, and sometimes we don't. I mean, you just do the best you can, and we hit that, but it's a lot of work to do it. So thank you both for that. Michelle, as an illustrator, as somebody turns a text over and says, "Go make pretty pictures," which is a lot more work than that. What is it that you look for when you're creating art from a text? As an illustrator, what's happening in your head?
I guess because I do children's literature, I can read the whole story. So I read it. I need to get a feel for it. And I guess the first question I ask myself is, like for each section of the book, what is the action? What is the main action? But it's not always a physical action that I feel really has the importance. Sometimes it's a conversation. And it's interesting, Sean, that you just held up that picture, because I was thinking about that one in particular. That's the story of the lion and the mouse, where the lion catches the mouse, he's going to eat him, and the mouse convinces him to let him go. And
He's holding onto the tail, yeah.
Yeah. And then later on, the lion gets caught in a trap and the mouse rescues him, which is the picture that you will find most often. But to me, the conversation between the lion and the mouse was intriguing. What was going on there? It just felt like there was more importance in that conversation than in the actual act of cutting through the ropes to let the lion out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
And I know that
sometimes the non-movement is more important than the movement.
Right. Capturing the moment. Does that make sense?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I know that when I tell that story, the conversation between the lion and the mouse, because that's a core story that we teach parents to tell, because it's such a good thing about, the lion catches the mouse and I'm going to eat you. And there's a whole thing in there where the mouse turns, again, pattern interrupt, right? There's a pattern interrupt there when the mouse talks to him and says, "Oh, you got to let me go," etc. And I'm going to help you. And haha. But then at the end, they start conversing again. And the mouse takes a different approach than normal in that. And so conversation is really important in that story. You caught that moment so well in that particular story.
Thank you.
And that's well. What mediums are you working in? What mediums do you want to keep playing with?
My favorite is watercolor collage. I love that. I love what I tend to do is wherever there's detail, I paint the detail, but I like to just take big sheets of paper and just splash the paint on and sprinkle salt in and see what the watercolor does, and then cut. That'll be the background.
Yes.
Or like the hair of the lion that came out of that. It can be used for, well, I don't know, actually. It depends on what it looks like to me at the time.
Yeah, it comes out. Phyllis asked in the question box on the YouTube, she says, illustrations for me are co-equal to the words in a children's book. Michelle, your style is so unique. How did that style evolve?
Oh, goodness. Honestly, I think in the very beginning that I did that, it was because I made a piece of art. I don't even remember what it was, but I loved the picture, but there was a mistake and I couldn't fix the mistake. So I just cut it out and glued it onto another sheet of paper. And I loved how it looked. And that's my style of art came out of a mistake.
Well,
Fixing a mistake.
Happened to a lot of art in the world. That's
A lot of writing too.
Yeah.
yeah, that's right. The constant evolution of that. Amanda, your story about how you got the attention of your publisher or whoever they are, I want to leave. There's something I'm going to ask everybody at the end, but I just want to leave kind of this last discussion point. I want to leave off with you. Can you talk about perseverance in getting a book published?
Sure. So I, like I had mentioned, I was something I put down and brought back into my life multiple times. And I'm glad I never truly stopped, because here I am. But what I'd started to do when I started taking my writing seriously again in 2017, and the story behind that, and there was just a newspaper article about it where she really honed in on that part. But what brought me back to my writing was some not so joyful stuff. I'd had a miscarriage in 2016, and then my husband had had a heart attack. And although dance is an outlet that brings me joy, I was just missing my spark a lot. And I saw this wonderful, amazing author illustrator, Michelle Nelson Schmidt, and she was providing so much joy out there in the world on Facebook. And she inspired me to start writing again. She hadn't realized she'd done it. Now she knows. And she's quoted on the back of my book, which was super special to me. But that's what happened. That's what finally brought me back to my journey, and it sparked joy again. So sometimes, you know, as writers, we need that outlet. And then there it was. And I'm fortunate to have my children, my 3 boys, and the 2 of them being in school. And during Read Across America week, I was going into their schools. I'd asked, hey, can I come read? And instead of just bringing in a picture book, I instead brought in this kind of book, right? The mock-up book. And I am not an illustrator whatsoever. So instead I had clip art to show them. And when I'd approached the publisher, Sean Bavala at Small Tooth Dog, and Michelle, I had queried them saying, a book that could turn into a dance show. Like, I just went all out there because I forget the way that yours was worded, but Savannah had also told me at the SCBWI meeting, like, he, you know, grab his attention and that sort of thing. And that is a goal for this book someday, to be where it can travel with dancers and me as the author, me dancing and being the author. I want that to happen also. Rachel's like, Amanda, maybe just one. She's the director of White Noise Dance Company. But I can do both. I can do it. But anyway, so I would go into schools and I would be reading my other manuscripts. Like this one I didn't write until 2019. And then Sean was the publisher I approached with it, and things started to happen. But prior to that, I'd gone into schools and read some of my other manuscripts, and it was just so fun to get the kids' feedback and stuff like that. I did make the mistake one time of bringing in like an actual book, and they're like, read that one. And I was like, well, no, we're going to read this one today, even though it doesn't have the, so that was an interesting experience with that. So just getting into the schools ahead of time also had caught Sean's attention that, all right, she's really serious about making this happen. And I definitely was. And just my joy of being around children and my joy of literature and my passion for dance and getting to combine it all has just been this really amazing experience. And I'm just so grateful that I never gave up on my journey.
Very good. Thank you. I will say, as a publisher, that perseverance is important. And it's important to know that when I look at a book, and if I tell you with all the love in my heart that no, that's not our path, that's probably the answer you should take. But if I say to you, this is interesting to me, will you keep in touch with me, etc., that's a good idea to do that, which you have done. And Tamara, you've done that with your books too. I mean, you know, that you should keep kind of poking at it. But take no as no when somebody says no, because publishers know what they want to release. And it's not about you personally in any way. But if there is an interest level that, you know, it may take several years before your book comes to light, which is one of our discussions tomorrow. It may take a while for books to come to light, but if the publisher says no, that's what it means. And go on to the next one, and it's okay. It's not you personally. But a qualified yeah is worth pursuing, and you did that. And so that's why we could continue to look at it. It took me a while to get that into the place where we could use it. You know, it took me a while to reach that. So you did a great job with that. I'm going to do just the brief commercials to wrap this place up, and then I'm going to just throw open the floor for final comments. If anybody has anything that they want to add on to the conversation before we wrap up, and I can't find my screen to share right now. There it is. All right, let me get over here. Just a couple of things that we would like to tell you before we go and give you an opportunity to get some prizes. If you are thinking about being an author, if things that have intrigued you during the Tucson Festival of Books, if you're kind of at the beginning stages, we invite you to join us at authortip.com and get our checklist, which is Are You Ready for Publishing Checklist, which for a lot of people is eye-opening for them to look at that. And that's at authortip.com. Put your name, your email address in there. We'll send you the checklist. There's a little training video that you can watch if you want to go with that. But get into that system so that we can start the conversation about you being an author, particularly if you are doing things with nonfiction, you're doing kids lit, you're doing stuff that works with families. Get into that conversation with us, and you do that at authortip.com. Get the checklist, get on that mailing list so we can do that. If you have already started to work as a creative, as an author, a speaker, healer, teacher, and you're kind of looking for, how do I really make this work? How do I use the passion capital I have in my life? How do I how do I take the next steps? How do I market my work without being sleazy about it? How do I do all of that? I invite you to look at speaker100.com. Get into that list. There's like a 22-minute masterclass, which gives you 4 concepts about the things that we look at as an organization to help you move forward. And there's several different levels of coaching in there that might be really of interest for you as well. Moving on to the last thing, and that is the prizes. Prizes, we like prizes. So this is the shirt that Michelle has put together for the Tucson Festival of Books. Last year, the last time there was a festival, it was a javelina. So we have a lino cut of the javelina. Now this is the owl from this year, from essentially on the burrowing owls of Arizona. And so we have that shirt. It says TFOB 21 on the bottom. It's got Michelle's little signature stamp on the back. If you would like to possibly win one of those shirts, you need to go to smalltoothdog.com/drawing, smalltoothdog.com/drawing, and put your name and information in there. And then tomorrow, about 7 o'clock-ish Sunday, we will pull 6 winners from that list. So you only need to enter once. Put your information in there. We'll pull some winners, and then Kelsey or one of the staff members will send you a code for you to be able to order that shirt for free as well. So that's exciting. We have a bunch of them. If you don't win, you can also purchase one if you would like as well. So that's smalltoothdog/drawing. And I think Kelsey has put all of those pieces in there, all that information. So let's go ahead and conclude if we can. If any of you on the panel have a kind of a last thought about Kidslit, this is the time to talk about it.
Seems like I'm always first. That's why I was holding back.
Jump, boy.
I think that books never go out of style. I mean, we talk about how that society has changed so much and everything is online and this. Well, people read books online. So books remain just as viable as they've ever been. And for me, I surrounded my children with books. My eldest daughter taught herself to read when she was 4. It embarrassed me because I was a kindergarten teacher, and I said, "Look, I didn't do this. I didn't teach her to read. She just did it herself. Don't blame it on me." But she just picked it up. It was just there, and I think that happens because you invest in it and you surround them and you immerse them in the reading, and it's important.
Yes, very good. Anyone else?
Yeah, can I just add that from the library perspective, the strongest category that we have for Kidlit, for those more advanced readers, is going to be in the fantasy area. But what's the hottest trend right now is nonfiction for Kidlit. And so not just biography, but disaster stories. And I'm not talking about necessarily, science or history, those things that lead children to be curious about things maybe that they'd never even heard about before. We're looking for those kind of books like crazy.
Yes, that's terrific. Yes, thank you for that. We have some stuff in the hopper that's designed for that kind of stuff too. So that's great to hear that. Thank you for that. Anybody else?
I would just like to say thank you for taking a chance on 10 Ballet Dancers. And I'm so appreciative that Sean and Michelle saw, what our culture is asking for these days. And they were really great about making sure in 10 Ballet Dancers that it is inclusive. And we're seeing all sorts of body types and all sorts of ethnicities and everything that we would like to be seeing out in Kids Lit today with the call for we need diverse books.
Thank you. Good. Thank you for that. Anybody else? The last thing that I want to say in conclusion, first off, I want to thank my panel today, Amanda Malakamati, Tamara Norwood, Mark Severson, Michelle Bavala, Harriet Cole. Thank you for being here and doing this and volunteering your time this afternoon. The thing that I want to say is you may be watching this right now as someone who wants to write books, and that's terrific. What I want to say to you right now, those of you who are parents, who may catch this either now or later on the replay, see that as you're exploring through our stuff. The strongest thing you can do for children to help them learn is to model learning. The best thing you can do to help your child learn to read is to model reading, is to read to them, is to have them read the book back to you when they're little. But even when they get older, even when they get 4th, 5th, 6th grade, I mean, Harriet Cole is starting to explore some of this, sharing reading and how important reading is. So if you want your kids to be readers, if you want your kids to learn, you model that. Your library doesn't have to be up to the ceiling and it doesn't have to have 700 books in it. But if you got 15 books on the shelf that says reading is important in our house, if your kid has a library card, that stuff is super important. That stuff counts. So I'd like to thank my panel today. Panel, do not leave yet. I'm going to turn off the YouTube live stream. I'm going to come back and talk to you in just a moment. But thank you for being with us. I'm Sean Bavala from the Small Tooth Dog Publishing Group. We have one more live stream tonight, 3 more tomorrow. The next one is at 7 p.m. Arizona time. Take a little dinner break here. We've been doing this all day. 7 p.m. Arizona time, where I'm going to talk about publishing books and what's current, what's the real thing that's happening in book publishing right now. So that's at 7 o'clock, right back here on the YouTube. So thank you all very much, panel.